one who is being charged by Yahweh to gather this assembly. Pay attention, because Yeshua said, when questioned about who he was, and he said, if you had known me, you would have known the Father. And on another place he says, Moses is the one who spoke of me. And if you knew who Moses was and knew about Moses, you would know of me. And what's happening here, as Moses is being tasked with revealing the marriage covenant and reinstituting the Sabbath as a sign of the covenant, it's Moses alone and the Torah of Moses that can do this. You will not find this anywhere in the New Testament, except in pieces. You will not find this understanding of the marriage covenant and the Sabbath being the sign of the marriage covenant anywhere but in the Torah of Moshe. That's why Yahweh said, Moses, you're tasked with assembling the congregation. And then he goes into revealing the purpose of the Sabbath. That's important. Now, the very following subject is something that the vast majority of the Jewish and Messianic community have struggled with, strained over. It's like straining at a gnat and swallowing a camel in the process. It was this phrase, kindling a fire. Genesis chapter 35, verse 3. He goes into talking about the Sabbath, the purpose of the Sabbath. Let me read this for you. 6 days shall your work be done, but on the seventh day there shall be to you a holy day, a Sabbath of rest to Yahweh. Whosoever doeth work therein shall be put to death. I wish Yahweh would make himself a little more plain. Just quit mincing words. Verse 3 says, you shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations upon the Sabbath day. I had someone question me all across the other side of the world about this very subject right here. There are some that believe the Sabbath should have so many boundaries and so much confinement that you can't even walk into a room and flip on a light switch because you just kindled a fire. You can't turn the key on in an internal combustion engine, a car, because you just kindled a fire. You can't turn on a stove because you just kindled a fire. I promise you, that's not what's being said in the Hebrew language. And we need to look at that. Would you like to? The Sabbath, from what we can glean, Yahweh's calling the assembly together. The assembly of Israel here represents a bride, just like in Genesis chapter 2, verse 1, when he called all the hosts of heaven together. And there was Adam and Eve, the assembled hosts of heaven, the marriage covenants given to them, the seal of the marriage covenants revealed. The same thing's taking place here in Exodus chapter 35. Well, it's obvious that the purpose of the marriage covenant and the seal of the marriage covenant is to remind us of what took place in Genesis chapter 1:28, when Yahweh said, Adam, you and Eve, be fruitful, multiply, replenish, subdue, and have dominion. Well, that's the shadow picture of the bride and Messiah. The church is a second Eve. Messiah is the second Adam, the last Adam, if you will, who's a quickening spirit. And so the purpose of the two is to be fruitful, multiply, replenish, subdue, and have dominion. That was reiterated there in Genesis chapter 2 when the marriage covenant was sealed, and again in Exodus chapter 35, verse 1. And now, as we begin to see what he's trying to teach us regarding the marriage covenant, it seems as if this phrase, this verse in chapter 35, verse 3, you will kindle no fire throughout your habitations upon the Sabbath day, is literally out of place. It's really not in keeping with the general context of what I see is being revealed. And so I had to break this thing down. Would you like to? In Hebrew, it's read, Lo teva'aru esh b'kol mos v'tekum b'yom ha'shabbat. Let's examine it word by word. The word lo in Hebrew means do not. It means it's an emphatic negative. No. Some of y'all need to get used to saying that. Hello? Because if you indulge the enemy, that's a word that you're going to have to cultivate an affinity for. You're going to have to learn how to tell the enemy, hit the road, Jack, and never come back. No more, no more. I don't know where that come from. But anyway, again, if you looked in the Hebrew, you'll notice that word lo is connected by a hyphen to another phrase, teva'aru, and one more time, when you see the hyphen connected, it's making those words that's connected by the hyphen one. Well, teva'aru has to be examined now. And if you look, you notice right in the front you have the tav prefixed or appended to it. Whenever the tav is at the front of a word as a prefix, it means third person future tense. In other words, you shall. Well, on the end, you have a suffix, and if you're familiar with it, that is, according to your Hebrew teacher, a holam vav, and that suffix means also you. So you have you shall, and then you on the other end of it. You shall you. Well, if I'm going to do something to you in the future, and if you's going to do something to you in the future, then I need to know what this root word is right here, don't you think? Now, he's not only talking to a company of individuals, but now that we've been chachal, brought together, we are one, we're echad. And who are we one with? The aleph and tav. And so what I do with this one as an individual will affect the entire body as a whole. A little leaven will leaven the whole lump. How much sin does it take before the loaf is compromised? Now, the root word in this phrase is the word ba'ar, Strong's number 1197, and it can be translated as kindle, burn, and consume. So in other words, you should not kindle, burn, and consume a fire in all of your habitations on the Sabbath day. But the Hebrew language carries you way further than that. Would you like to go further than most men have gone before? This word, thank you, my friend. I knew I could count on you. This word ba'ar also means to become brutish, stupid, and ignorant. The word brutish, for those of you that are not English scholars, means something that is grossly sensual or sexually perverse. What does that have to do with keeping the Sabbath? Well, isn't he talking to the bride? And what has the bride had a tendency to do in her past? She's had a tendency to have other gods in the face of Yahweh. That's why you have the first commandment that says, thou shalt have no other gods in my face. Are you with me? Say amen right there. Well, as we continue to look at it, the two-letter root, and I don't have this on the view screen for you, but the two-letter root of ba'ar is beit resh. And of course, you know, beit resh, bar, can mean son, it can mean clean, but it can also mean to birth a son as a mother who births a son. Genesis 1:28, be fruitful, multiply, replenish, subdue, and have dominion. The purpose of the husband and wife coming together is to produce a son in the earth. Am I correct? My man. Well, did you know that you could birth the wrong son depending on what seeds deposited? If you don't think so, just ask Eve. She birthed Cain and Abel. Okay? The next thing it says that thou shalt not kindle a fire. Well, the word fire, ish, 784, is translated just that, but it happens to be the same root as the word isha, which is the word wife. Are you getting any of this? Now let's look at this next phrase. Let me go back and look at it for you and read it. Lo tevaru esh bekol moshvatekum. That's the phrase I want to look at now, moshvatekum. And what's happened is that they've combined several Hebrew words and actually made some contractions out of them to form this phrase. And we're going to look at the prefix and suffix, and then we'll get to the root of it, if you'll allow me. It's translated in the English as habitations. But if you notice, there is a mem prefix to the front of it. The mem means from or out of, the place of origin, something within it, throughout your habitations. Are you following me? Okay. Well, you have this suffix here, tekim, which means your. So you should kindle no fire throughout your habitation. So really the root word habitation is found in the center of the prefix and suffix, right? Well, the root then is this word moshav, and moshav, Strong's number 4186, is translated as dwelling. But we can break the word moshav down even further because you have a mem prefix to that word, mo or mem yeshav. Again, the mem prefix meaning from or out of, the source of origin. So the bare bones of this word is yeshav. And that is translated, Strong's number 3427, as the Hebrew word which means to dwell with as in marriage. Now, if you, again, will look at the vav that's prefixed to the word yeshav, it changes the tense from past to future. And so it's indicating now this Most Vayakhel indicating something that's going to happen to whoever's involved in kindling this fire in their habitations in the future. Are you with me? And so it again conveys, you shall. And then the two-letter root is the sheen bait, shuv. Now, shuv means to return. But the sheen bait can also mean a gray-haired man. Now, this is important. Pay attention. Because if you don't go back and look at the basic gist of the Hebrew language, you'll think it's just someone like me, an older gentleman standing up here whose hair is gray. But the inference here is that he is one who returns, and he has been returning for such a length of time that he is now matured. He's an elderly individual who is aged and has continued to keep and guard the feasts and festivals in their cycles. You see how important this is? So the phrase, kindle a fire, how much time do I have? The phrase kindle a fire is associated, if you look at it throughout the Torah, it's associated with destruction. Well, in addition to then what you can see on the surface about just basically not building a fire in your dwellings throughout the land on the Sabbath, you can see that the Hebrew has an entirely different and deeper, more profound meaning. So I'm going to give you the expanded definition according to David. And I challenge you to go back and look in the Torah and see for yourself if this is not what it reads. Let me go back and remind you, the word ba'ar, to kindle, to burn, consume, and what it can be translated as brutish, stupid, and ignorant. So the phrase, do not kindle a fire in all your habitations, can read this way. Don't you be a stupid and grossly sensual wife, kindling strange fire in my habitation, my tabernacle. You will return as an aged one who guards the divine appointments as we dwell together in marriage. Let me go back and revisit that a little bit. Don't be a stupid and grossly sensual wife displaying carnal, fleshly lusts. And did you know that those carnal, fleshly lusts, according to Galatians 5:19 through 25, can be anger and bitterness and resentment and jealousy and lasciviousness and all sorts of perversions? Did you understand what I just said? So if we're prone to displaying those, in particular on the Sabbath, that makes us fall into that category of individuals that are grossly sensual, kindling a fire in the holy place of Yahweh. What we've done, we have offered strange fire. We're just as guilty as Nadab and Abihu, bringing strange fire offered to pagan idols into the tabernacle. My goodness, how could my display of carnal appetite, fleshly perversions, bitterness and resentment and anger and frustration, how can all of that be reckoned or likened to kindling strange fire? Well, guess what? If the flesh is being exalted, the God of the flesh is not Yahweh. You understand what I'm saying? So if I allow the fleshly manifestations to present themselves, what I'm doing, I'm offering the flesh up to the God of the flesh. And so what I've done in kindling that fire, I just brought the strange fire into the habitation of Yahweh, into the tabernacle. Puts this thing in a little bit different perspective, doesn't it? Now, the lusts of the flesh and the display of those reveal who your God is. Oh, if you're one of those who is struggling to do everything you can to bring the flesh under control, amen, and more power to you, because what you're doing is that you are doing everything you can to honor Yahweh. But I'm talking about individuals who walk not after the Spirit, but after the flesh. And we're told in Romans chapter 8 to not do that. We're to walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. For the law of the Spirit of life in Messiah Yeshua has made us free from the law of sin and death. Now, if you've enjoyed the teaching thus far, if you'll tune in on to track 2 of this CD, we'll get to the rest of it. Hope you've enjoyed yourself thus far. Shalom Aleichem. Again, we want you to know how much of a pleasure it is for you to be here with us and for us to have you with us, as a matter of fact, in the house. I apologize, got that backwards. It's a pleasure to have you. And of course, hopefully it should be a pleasure for you to be here as well, because you're hearing the word of Yahweh and it's not compromised or watered down. We're talking about this week's Torah portion, Vayakhel,